There is a silent, brutal geometry to the way human beings scan a room. You have felt it. You walk through a door wearing what you call comfortable clothes, and you feel the temperature instantly drop. The receptionist looks past you to greet someone else. The person you are speaking to nods, but their eyes are dead, entirely detached from your presence. You tell yourself they are just busy, or perhaps it is just a bad day. It is not a bad day. You have just been visually audited, categorized, and dismissed in less than 3 seconds. The game was over before you even opened your mouth. We cling to a very comforting lie in modern society. We tell ourselves that substance matters more than surface. We are taught from childhood that it is what is on the inside that counts, that a pure heart, a strong work ethic, and a brilliant mind will eventually be recognized by the world if we just stay the course. This is the propaganda of the powerless. It is a fairy tale designed to keep you waiting quietly in line, while those who understand the unspoken rules of power cut straight to the front. The reality of human nature is much darker and much more efficient. Humans are, at their core, biological machines running on ancient hardware. We do not have the time, the energy, or the desire to slowly unearth the hidden gold of your character. Psychologists call this being a cognitive miser. The human brain consumes a massive amount of energy, and to survive, it has evolved to take aggressive shortcuts. When a stranger looks at you, their brain does not want to read your resume or listen to your philosophy. It wants an immediate answer to a primal question. Are you a threat, an ally, or prey? When you look poor, unkempt, or physically diminished, you do not trigger empathy in the power structures of the world. You trigger a predatory response. Most people fundamentally misunderstand what poverty actually signals to the human animal. They think looking poor just means you lack money, and they assume others will simply be indifferent to your bank account. But poverty, in the cold calculus of social dynamics, is never viewed merely as a financial state. It is viewed as a lack of deterrence. In the wild, a predator does not look for the healthiest, strongest animal in the herd. It looks for the one with a limp. It looks for the animal that is separated from the pack, the one that cannot fight back. In the concrete jungle of the modern world, your frayed collar, your slumped posture, your scuffed shoes, and your ill-fitting clothes, these are your limp. You are visually broadcasting that you have no resources. You are telling the room that you have no powerful allies to avenge you, no capital to defend yourself, and no leverage to make anyone regret crossing you. You are signaling that you are entirely safe to exploit. Think about how this plays out in the sterile, unforgiving environments of our daily lives. Think about the corporate office, the university campus, the luxury retail store, or even the subtle battleground of modern dating. When a man walks into a room looking sharp, controlled, and visually immaculate, the environment bends to accommodate him. People instinctively step out of his way. They lower their voices. They offer assistance without being asked. They assume he is connected to power, and because they assume he is connected to power, they treat him as if he already has it. They do not want to risk offending someone who might be capable of destroying them. Now imagine the exact same man, with the exact same intellect and the exact same bank balance, walking into that exact same room looking disheveled. He wears clothes that swallow his frame, his hair is unmanaged, and he broadcasts an air of apologetic survival. The treatment violently reverses. He is spoken to slowly, condescendingly. He is offered the worst terms, the longest wait times, and the absolute minimum level of respect required by law. The mechanic overcharges him. The landlord ignores his maintenance requests. The client lowballs his proposal. The world pushes back against him simply because it knows it can. The resistance you face every single day, the exhaustion of constantly having to prove your worth from a deficit, is not bad luck. It is the natural consequence of walking onto a battlefield naked and expecting the enemy to admire your bravery. You can scream into the void about how unfair this is. You can write essays about how society should be better, how people should look past the surface and judge you on your merit. You can retreat into the comforting illusion that you are somehow morally superior because you refuse to play the game of appearances. But the world does not weigh your soul. It calculates your armor. When you strip yourself of that armor in the name of authenticity or comfort, you are not being rebellious. You are simply volunteering for the role of the victim. You are handing your leverage over to people who will not hesitate to use it against you. You thought they were judging your character, but they were simply calculating your cost. And the cost of looking diminished is a price you pay in blood. That cost is extracted from you daily through a psychological mechanism so deeply ingrained that people do not even realize they are weaponizing it against you. It is called the horn effect, and it is the dark, unforgiving twin of the halo effect. If a person observes just one positive trait in you, if you are highly attractive, or if your tailoring is impeccable, their brain will automatically assume you possess a host of other positive, unseen traits. They will instinctively assume you are intelligent, trustworthy, and highly competent. But the horn effect operates with equal, devastating efficiency in the opposite direction. If the observer notes a single visual negative, if your shoes are severely scuffed, if your posture sags under the weight of your own existence, if your clothes suggest you have simply surrendered, the mind assumes all your internal traits are equally compromised. They assume you are lazy. They assume you are undisciplined. They assume you are a profound liability. Why does the world make this massive leap in logic? Because discipline is inherently visible. Order is naturally magnetic, while chaos is biologically repulsive. When you present an avatar of chaos to the world, you force everyone around you to expend energy managing their perception of you. You become a cognitive burden. The visual is the only tangible proof the world has of the internal, or at least, that is how the human animal processes reality. If you cannot govern the simple, immediate geometry of your own physical presentation, why would anyone believe you can govern a business, manage a crisis, or honor a complex contract? If you cannot maintain the fabric hanging on your own frame, why would anyone trust you with their capital or their reputation? To neglect your image is to slander your own potential. You are walking into the marketplace of life and loudly declaring that you are a depreciating asset. And the world, being cruel, efficient, and entirely literal, will believe you without a second thought. Let us observe how this dictates the movement of resources in real time. There is a dark, cynical paradox that governs human society. Money, opportunity, and respect flow most effortlessly to those who look as though they absolutely do not need them. Imagine a man walking into a bank or a corporate boardroom asking for a critical injection of capital. He arrives dressed in desperation. His clothes do not fit his frame. His collar is frayed. and he smells faintly of anxiety. His voice carries the thin, reedy pitch of a man who is staring down the barrel of ruin. What happens? The vault doors lock, the interest rates skyrocket. The terms become instantly draconian. He is offering the world a cost, and nobody wants to pay a cost. He is categorized as a high-risk contagion because he is visibly bleeding. Now, observe another man who requires the exact same capital, perhaps even more desperately, behind closed doors. But he enters the room wearing a meticulously tailored suit. His grooming is razor-sharp, his watch catches the light, and his hands are perfectly still. He moves with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who has endless options and nowhere he actually needs to be. He does not ask for a favor. He proposes an alliance. The vault swings open, the terms bend in his favor. The decision-makers smile and offer him coffee. Why? Because he signaled abundance. Humans operate on the strict law of association. We instinctively associate visual control with capability, and we associate physical disarray with sheer incompetence. When you walk into a room looking formidable, you are lowering the perceived risk of the people across the table. You become their insurance policy. If a manager hires a man who looks impeccable and that man fails, the manager is forgiven. The board will say he looked the part and fooled them all. But if they hire a man who looks like a disaster and he fails, the manager looks like an absolute fool. Decision-makers will rarely risk their own reputation to excavate your hidden potential. This brutal judgment is not reserved solely for grand entrances or high-stakes corporate negotiations. It lives in the microscopic details of your daily existence, silently assassinating your credibility. It is the dirt underneath your fingernails. It is the worn-down, collapsing heels of your shoes. It is, perhaps most glaringly in the modern era, the cracked screen of your phone. A shattered phone screen is not just a minor technological inconvenience. It is a screaming siren of poverty and chaotic entropy. When you place a broken device on a table during a meeting or a date, you are telling the room a very specific, tragic story. You are broadcasting, "I caused damage to something valuable, and I lack the resources, the discipline, or the self-respect to fix it. Therefore, I simply live with broken things." This is the contagion of entropy. People are terrified of failure. Deep down in the primitive layers of the brain, humans believe that bad fortune is a virus that can be caught through proximity. If they associate with a man who looks dusty, who looks worn down by the sheer friction of daily survival, they fear his bad luck will attach itself to them. They will distance themselves from you, not out of malice, but out of a blind, instinctual desire for self-preservation. But even worse than what the world thinks of your broken things is what your broken things do to your own psyche. Surrounding yourself with unmaintained, damaged artifacts tells your subconscious mind that you deserve a compromised reality. It acclimates you to the aesthetic of the loser. You may find this reality repulsive. You may argue that it is a profound injustice to judge a man's worth by the polish on his shoes or the integrity of his accessories. You might tell yourself that you are above this superficial game, that you are a creature of immense substance, and that anyone who judges you by your cover does not deserve to read your pages. You can spend your entire life arguing with gravity as you plummet from the cliff, but your moral outrage will not build a parachute. The world owes you nothing. It certainly does not owe you the patience required to look past your unkempt exterior. If you refuse to curate your image, You are not a martyr for authenticity. You are simply arrogant. You are demanding that the world do the heavy lifting of translating your value, while you stubbornly refuse to speak its visual language. To claim that you are simply being yourself when you look disheveled is a massive strategic error. Authenticity without leverage is nothing more than a public confession of weakness. To live with broken things is to tell the world you are a broken thing. But the danger isn't just in the fabric on your back. It is in the desperate frequency you broadcast when you open your mouth. There is a look that instantly identifies a person who has spent their life at the bottom of the power hierarchy. It is an unmistakable biological signature. It is the poverty gaze. It is not about the clothes they are wearing in that specific moment. You can drape a beggar in Italian silk, but if he maintains the poverty gaze, he will merely look like a beggar who stole a suit. This gaze is characterized by a constant, flickering apology for taking up space. It is the ingrained habit of breaking eye contact first, of physically shrinking when walking through a doorway, of pulling the shoulders inward as if anticipating a blow. It is the nervous, high-pitched laugh that instantly follows a disrespectful comment from a superior, signaling absolute submission. These are the physical habits of a serf. They are the kinetics of scarcity. This is the great illusion that traps so many intelligent people. You believe that your lack of capital, your lack of an impressive title, or your lack of a wealthy network is what makes you a target. You assume the world somehow psychically knows your bank balance. That is a lie you tell yourself to avoid the real, uncomfortable truth. The world does not know your balance. It only knows your behavior. Your lack of resources is not what betrays you to the wolves. What betrays you are the appeasing, subordinate, hyperactive signals you actively choose to broadcast every single day. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are an active participant in your own diminishment. You are writing the script for your own marginalization with your body language and your speech patterns. Let us dissect the loudest and most damning signal of this internal scarcity: noise. The man who feels poor regardless of his actual wealth is almost always incredibly noisy. He is noisy with his sudden, jerky physical movements. He is noisy with his constant complaints about how tired he is or how unfair the system is. But most fatally, he is noisy with his words. When he is placed in a high-stakes environment, a meeting with a superior, a negotiation, or even a date with someone he perceives as high value, he becomes terrified of silence. Silence, to the impoverished mind, is a threat. It is an empty space where he assumes he is being judged and found wanting. So he babbles, he over-explains his position. He offers unprompted justifications for his choices. He reveals his anxieties, his minor debts, his minor ailments. He tells you exactly how hard he worked on a project, seeking validation like a child, presenting a drawing to a parent. He believes he is being open, authentic, and building rapport. In reality, he is systematically handing his opponent every piece of ammunition required to destroy him. He is inflating the supply of his words, and in doing so, he is instantly crashing their demand. By over-talking, he communicates that he does not believe his presence alone is enough. He feels he must constantly sing for his supper. He is signaling that he needs the other person's approval to survive the interaction. Now, contrast this with the kinetics of abundance. Power is still. True leverage is incredibly quiet. Look at the apex predator in the wild. The tiger does not announce its presence until the exact moment it strikes. Look at the power dynamics in any boardroom. The CEO at the head of the table almost always speaks the least. The Godfather whispers. He never shouts. When you are comfortable with silence, you project an aura of massive wealth. Not necessarily financial wealth, but a wealth of options, a wealth of security, and a wealth of self-possession. When you stop fighting to fill the void and simply allow the silence to stretch out, you create an unbearable tension for the weaker minds in the room. They will rush to fill that silence, and in doing so, they will negotiate against themselves. They will reveal their own insecurities. By saying nothing, you force the environment to perform for you. You become a blank canvas, and people will inevitably project their own fantasies and fears onto that canvas. They will wonder what you are thinking. They will assume you know something they do not. In that vacuum of information, they will invent power for you. But the absolute second you break that silence to complain about the traffic, or to nervously chuckle at a bad joke, the illusion shatters. The spell is broken. You become mortal, you become common, and you become instantly disposable. You must understand that the human brain operates on a ruthless hierarchy of value. We do not value what is easily obtained, and we certainly do not value what aggressively pushes itself upon us. Scarcity creates value. This law applies to gold, it applies to real estate, and it absolutely applies to your physical and verbal presence. You must make your presence scarce. You must make your words rare, heavy, and deliberate. You must train your body to move with the smooth, unhurried pace of a man who is not paid by the hour. You must hold the gaze of the person across from you until they physically feel the weight of your assessment, not the other way around. Until you master this, no amount of money will save you. You have seen the tragic spectacle of lottery winners who go entirely broke within a few years. Their failure is not financial. It is psychological. They acquired millions of dollars, but they never killed the serf inside them. They bought the Ferrari, but they drove it with the posture of an apologetic thief. They wore the Rolex, but they still displayed the poverty gaze, because they still looked, moved, and sounded like prey. The predators of the world simply circled in and stripped them of their wealth. The world always corrects an imbalance between a man's internal posture and his external resources. If you bleed anxiety, the sharks will never ask for your bank statements before they bite. You must first stop the bleeding, and that requires constructing the armor of the prince. You must first stop the bleeding, and that requires constructing the armor of the prince. But the construction of this armor is where the weak inevitably make their favorite excuse. They tell themselves, and anyone who will listen, that they cannot afford a tailored suit, that they do not have the capital to project wealth, and that therefore the game is rigged against them. This is a catastrophic failure of imagination and a cowardly retreat into victimhood. Looking formidable is rarely about the designer brand stitched into the collar of your jacket. It is entirely about the meticulous, uncompromising maintenance of your reality. It is about signaling intent. A man wearing a $20 shirt that is brilliantly white, fiercely ironed, and perfectly tucked will always command more immediate respect in a room than a man wearing a $1,000 designer hoodie that is stained, sagging, and smells of yesterday's poor decisions. The former signals absolute, terrifying control over his physical environment. The latter signals surrender, Discipline costs absolutely nothing. Polishing your shoes requires time and friction, not capital. Ironing the wrinkles out of your trousers requires effort, not a trust fund. Ensuring your fingernails are immaculate, your hair is sharply defined, and your posture is rigidly maintained. These are investments of will, not investments of cash. When you master these micro details, you execute what Machiavelli understood about the mechanics of perception. The prince does not need to possess every single virtue, but he absolutely must appear to possess them. You must curate the physical artifacts of your life with ruthless precision, because the world does not weigh your soul. It calculates your armor. When you wear this armor, it is not merely a defense mechanism. It is a psychological weapon of projection. By offering no visual flaws, you give the predatory eyes in the room nothing to latch onto. When they look at a perfectly maintained exterior, their primitive brain encounters a perfectly smooth surface. There are no cracks to exploit, no scuffs to mock, no fraying edges to pull at. Because you offer no visual weaknesses, you force their mind to slide off your physical form and project their own assumptions of power onto your blank canvas. You become a psychological mirror. If the person across from you is secretly insecure, your immaculate presentation and your lethal silence will make them feel deeply inadequate. Without you uttering a single syllable, they will unconsciously begin to audition for your approval. This is the velvet trap. You have entirely flipped the power dynamic using nothing but an iron and a tin of shoe polish. Consider how this applies to the battlefield of networking, dating, or forging alliances. The instinct of the amateur, when trying to impress a powerful figure, is to reach dangerously beyond their grasp. If they invite a potential investor or a high-value prospect to a meeting, they suggest a dinner at an expensive restaurant they cannot actually afford. Throughout the meal, the amateur sweats. They mentally calculate the bill. Their eyes dart nervously to the menu prices. They laugh a little too loud. The guest instantly smells the anxiety. That anxiety is the unmistakable, pungent scent of poverty, and it kills the alliance before the check ever arrives. The strategist plays a completely different game. The strategist invites that exact same powerful figure to a modest, quiet coffee shop. He buys 2 black coffees for $4, but he sits at that small table with the relaxed, unhurried leisure of a king holding court in his own throne room. He dominates the flow of the conversation. He asks piercing, analytical questions, and he pays the $4 with a slight, bored smile. He is the absolute master of a small domain, rather than a terrified, sweating servant in a large one. He understands that the venue is irrelevant. The frame is everything. This is the art of tactical framing. A master photographer does not need a pristine city to take a beautiful photograph. He simply frames the shot to exclude the garbage burning in the alleyway. You are the sole director of your physical and social image. It is your ultimate responsibility to crop out the garbage. If the only vehicle you own is rusted, damaged, and makes a grinding noise, you do not park it directly in front of the building where you are negotiating a crucial deal. You park it 3 blocks away, entirely out of sight, and you walk the final stretch. You arrive on foot, breathing easily, moving with purpose, and standing tall. You control the narrative by selectively withholding the visual evidence of your struggle. The mediocre masses will tell you that this is deceitful. They will cry that you are being a fraud, that you are faking it, and that you should just be completely transparent about where you are in life. Do not listen to the losers of the game. This is not deceit. This is pragmatic formatting. You are simply removing the visual friction that prevents powerful people from wanting to invest in you. You are building a clean, unblemished interface for the world to interact with. When you look impeccably clean, you signal that you are entirely removed from the grime of the daily struggle. The wealthy, the powerful, and the beautiful are drawn to that cleanliness because it looks safe. It looks like an asset that is ready to be scaled, rather than a drowning liability that needs to be rescued. You have scrubbed the dust from your avatar and learned to sit in the silence of power. But the final illusion requires you to ruthlessly audit the ecosystem you exist within. You have scrubbed the dust from your avatar and learned to sit in the silence of power. But the final illusion requires you to ruthlessly audit the ecosystem you exist within. It is the most brutal, unforgiving element of visual leverage, and it is the one where most men hesitate, because it requires a profound hardness of heart. The reality of human perception is that you do not exist in a vacuum. You are viewed as the sum total of the environment you choose to tolerate. You can master your posture, perfect your grooming, and weaponize your silence. But if you walk into a room flanked by men who look entirely defeated, you will be painted with the exact same brush of failure. You are the absolute average of the visual and psychological signals surrounding you. If you enter the gates with a pack of scavengers, the gatekeepers will never mistake you for a lion. Consider the tragedy of the brilliant strategist who refuses to curate his circle. He possesses a razor-sharp intellect and a towering ambition, yet out of a misplaced sense of loyalty to his past, he continues to associate with men who dress in the uniform of the victim. His companions slouch. They complain loudly about the unfairness of the system, and they carry the unmistakable scent of permanent submission. When our strategist walks into a high-leverage environment, a premium social club, a corporate networking event, or a room filled with potential capital, he brings this visual drag with him. The decision-makers in the room do not take the time to interview him to discover he is the exception to his group. They rely on the biological shortcut of association. They look at the jesters he has brought to the war council. They categorize him as a clown by proxy, and they permanently close the vault. If you want to rise, you must understand the optics of contamination. The world assumes that birds of a feather flock together, which means poverty of appearance and poverty of mindset are highly contagious by association. When you are seen with the successful, the polished, and the powerful, their credibility transfers directly to you via the halo effect. You borrow their leverage simply by standing in their proximity. This does not mean you must completely abandon your old friends or hate your past, but you must compartmentalize your life with the cold precision of a general. The battlefield of success is not a place for sentimentality. When you step onto that field, you must walk only with other warriors. You must distance yourself from the visual drag of the defeated, because powerful people are terrified of associating with failure, and they will run from anyone who brings failure into their visual field. When you finally master this, when you meticulously curate your clothes, your silence, your body language, and your social ecosystem, something terrifying and beautiful happens. It is the ultimate paradox of Machiavellian strategy. You stop acting. The profound alchemy of the mask is that it does not merely fool the audience, it inevitably reconstructs the actor. Most people believe that internal confidence creates a powerful external appearance. They sit around in their stained clothes and their collapsed posture, waiting to magically feel like a king, before they decide to dress like one. They have the formula entirely backward. Action precedes feeling. The powerful man constructs the feeling through the deliberate architecture of his physical actions. When you dress with absolute power, when you move with terrifying stillness, and when you refuse to break eye contact, the world responds to you differently. People step out of your way. They speak to you with deference. They offer you terms reserved for the elite. The sudden absence of the daily friction you used to experience is startling. This is not magic. It is raw, undeniable data. Your brain receives this new data. This sudden influx of respect and submission from your environment, and it triggers a biological cascade. Your serotonin levels spike. The nervous system rewires itself to match the external feedback. You actually become more confident, more aggressive, and more capable. Because you look in the mirror and see a contender, you begin to take the absolute risks of a contender. You negotiate with fangs because you finally believe your own propaganda. The fake exterior has successfully hacked your nervous system and rebuilt your real interior. You no longer tolerate the disrespect you used to quietly absorb, because the avatar you have constructed demands a higher caliber of treatment. By refusing to look poor, you have actively rejected the identity of poverty. You have rejected the societal script that dictates you must struggle quietly in the background. Hoping to be noticed by a benevolent system, you have declared, physically and visually, that you are the exception. The world is desperately starved for leadership. It is starved for strength, and it is starved for anything that looks like a sure thing. When you project that certainty, the environment will bend to accommodate you. It will open the doors it kept padlocked for years. It will hand you the leverage it viciously denied you yesterday. You are no longer waiting for the gold to arrive so you can ask for permission to polish the crown. You have simply taken the crown, placed it firmly on your head, and forced the gold to follow the king. The silent judgment of the world is happening right now, at this very second. You are either the architect of that judgment or you are its victim. Tomorrow, do not dress for the world you suffer in. Dress for the world you intend to conquer.